If you're just waking up this morning and incredulous about what's going on, you're not alone. Hi, I'm Lisa K. Donner, editor-in-chief of LibertyNation.com, and this is a special edition of the Conservative Five. To sum up election night 2020 quickly, the GOP appears to be keeping the Senate. The Democrats appear to be keeping the House, though there are some pickups by the GOP in the House. But for the presidential race, well, that's a gray area. Joining me this morning are Sarah Cowgill, Graham Noble, Joe Schaefer, and Tim Donner. So we've been staring at 238 for Biden, 213 electoral votes for Trump. Meanwhile, the crazies are in the streets. What the hell is going on? Sarah, why don't you start us out?
That's what everybody wants to know. What the heck is going on? People are crazy right now. There's no determined answer. People are calling for vote recounts, and there's fraud in the air. There's all sorts of silly stuff going on, and people are just kind of unhinged this morning. And I'm not saying just Democrats or Republicans, but pretty much it's a bipartisan unhinged moment.
Okay, well, we do have a saying at Liberty Nation. It's called Tim Does Math. Tim, it's map time. Give us the path.
Well, the path is increasingly narrow for President Trump. Last time he won two more states than he needed. He won Pennsylvania in 2016, and then he added on Michigan and Wisconsin to take him to over 300 electoral votes. This time, he didn't pluck off. It looks like he will not pluck off Michigan and Wisconsin, which would have been okay if he wins Pennsylvania, except that he lost Arizona. And I think a lot of the air went out of the balloon when he lost Arizona, because there was a presumption that he would win Arizona along with North Carolina and Georgia, where he's leading, but he's going to need a lot more than that, and he's going to need more than Pennsylvania. So the math does not look good for him at this point. It's a demonstration of how relentless media opposition over the course of 4 years from the media and political establishment, it's like they tugged at Superman's cape, and Trump looks like he came up just short of pulling it off.
Okay, but Graham, it's not over until it's over, right?
No, certainly not. Or at this stage, it's hard to see any other outcome than Biden taking Nevada, Wisconsin, and Michigan, and I believe that if he takes those three, he secures enough electoral votes to win the election. But then, of course, I'm quite sure that the Trump campaign will take legal action over the counts in Michigan and Wisconsin. They're going to be razor thin, though. I mean, it is still actually possible that Trump could win either one of those or even both of them. That's certainly, not beyond the realms of possibility. I'm just going to add one thing, though. I think regardless of how this whole situation ends, when the dust settles, I think the biggest lesson from this is that there's got to be an entire overhaul of the US electoral system. And I'm not talking about any nonsense about getting rid of the electoral college or anything, but this insanity with the confusion over mail-in ballots and the different deadlines from states. And I'm a huge states' rights guy, but I think when we're talking about future federal elections, there actually needs to be uniformity across all the states about how this is done, because this is a complete, well, I won't use a word that I would like to use because this is a family show.
Okay, Joe, you've probably covered politics more than anybody else except for Tim on LibertyNation.com. What say you?
Well, I would like to emphasize what Sarah mentioned about how this is going to increase the clear polarization in this country. The way this unfurled feeds into both sides' views of America. You had the Trump people. This was November 3rd was a dream night for Donald Trump. He won the states he felt he needed to win his firewall, assuming he holds on to North Carolina and Georgia, had that resounding victory in Florida. And then he had this insurgence of Rust Belt in-person voters. 700,000 vote advantage in Pennsylvania, 300,000 in Michigan, 120,000 in Wisconsin, with 90% of the vote calculated. It seemed like it was his America First people coming through for him like they did in 2016. And then it evaporated so fast that in a way, his supporters, I don't think they're going to have a hard time accepting how this went down. And conversely, for Democrats, they believe in this process. They believed in coronavirus lockdowns and mail-in balloting. Let's not have big rallies because we don't want to be super spreaders. So this feeds into their narrative that we were responsible, we did everything right. Of course, the mail-in balloting should be heavily our way. So if Trump comes back and wins, you're going to have Democrats not willing to accept that. And if Trump loses this way through this machinery in action process, MAGA people are not going to accept that. So the bottom line is the polarization in this country gets worse, if that's even possible.
Okay, well, most of us were up most of the night and were bleary, but as I remember it, everything was rolling along, everything was coming in. And then when Trump started to take a commanding lead in Pennsylvania, boom, they shut down Philadelphia voting. Then when Trump started to pull away a little bit in, I believe it was Georgia, boom, we're going to stop counting. You know, I'm not a conspiracy person, really, I'm not. But I just wonder if there was some kind of thought to let's drag this till the next day.
Well, you're talking about a record number of mail-in and early votes. We've said it all along. The president said it all along. The potential for hanky-panky is greater with those kind of votes than any other. That's why Republicans invested so much in the ground game and in getting people to vote on election day. And Trump won almost every state in the union in terms of the voting on election day, except, maybe New York and California. So this mail-in ballot phenomenon is going to be discussed for years to come once this is over. I'll tell you what else is going to be discussed is the polls. They are so wrong. Real Clear Politics average had Joe Biden up 7.2 points in the popular vote. He is ahead now by about 2.3, 2.4%. So they're way off. They're 4.5, 5 points off, and their battleground polls were absolutely useless. So the way that these races are measured has got to change in the future because the pollsters have no clue about how to forecast an election. Either that or they were using it as pure propaganda to make a Biden victory seem inevitable. And hey, looks like it worked, didn't it?
Okay.
2 points here I'd like to make quickly. Lisa skirted the whole conspiracy theory thing, but let's face it, it seemed like an outright coordinated effort to start closing down counting the votes. And the other thing I think is going to come out of this election, regardless of the winner, is going to have to be some kind of national, federal law on how elections are run. If you leave it up to each state, who knows what you're going to get? Who knows who's in charge? I mean, it's supposed to be a bipartisan, election board or what have you, but that's not always the case. And so I think that this election will produce something that has to be run on a federal level.
Okay, let me just ask you one thing, Sarah. The only polling operation I followed two, Rasmussen and Trafalgar. Trafalgar was pretty accurate everywhere, but WT blank, Arizona. I know you spent a couple decades there, so please give us a little inside info, what you're hearing on the ground in Arizona.
Well, the people who were in the 98-mile long Trump train are flabbergasted. They certainly believe there's hanky-panky going on. They don't think it should have been called. Even when AP finally called it after Fox did, they still said, no way, there's no way. Somebody cheated. And that is all over social media in Arizona, all over the news channels in Arizona, that people are really fired up and wondering what happened. But in the same breath, you have to understand that the influx of immigrants, illegal or otherwise, into Arizona has changed the makeup. Oh, and the California nuts, but it's changed the makeup of the state. What used to be a solid, always going to vote conservative has been trying to turn purple or blue now for a while.
Yeah, can I jump on that? Let me jump on that really quick, because that was a hugely important point that Sarah just made. Arizona and Virginia have something in common. They were both solidly red states that are now seemingly turning solidly blue. What else do they also have in common? 13% of their state's population are foreign-born immigrants. 13%, that's certainly enough to change an election. You have 2 Democratic senators now in Arizona. I mean, it's becoming a blue state, and just like Virginia, it's demographics moving this change, and Republicans really need to be aware of that moving forward.
But it's interesting because if you're going to look at the Hispanic vote in Arizona, you have to look at the Hispanic vote in Florida, which turned out really for Trump.
Different country. Cuba has been under, communism, socialism. They get in boats and paddle for their lives. The guys, coming across the border in Arizona hardly have that kind of problem, and they've never lived under that kind of regime. So you've got a whole different kind of Latina or Latino vote. It's not remotely the same.
Right.
Texas is more like Arizona, and Texas was almost, a heart palpitating, holy moly, what the heck is going on there? And, I knew that Texas would come out for Trump. However, I thought it'd be a wider margin, honestly.
Okay, so we're going to be back with another live stream later today. But before we go, Graham and Tim, just some final thoughts, state of the race, and where you think this is headed in the next few hours. Graham, you go first.
Well, I'd like to imagine all kinds of scenarios. I think in terms of Pennsylvania, I don't see any realistic way that Biden wins Pennsylvania, but that may well be a moot point because of Wisconsin and Michigan. Those are going to be razor thin margins in those 2 states, and I believe that whichever candidate ends up carrying one or both of those states, I think we're in for court fights over probably the counts in both of those states.
Okay, Tim. Okay, we seem to have lost Tim's audio.
Hey, I'm back.
Okay, go ahead.
There was no wave. There was no blue wave. There was no red wave. The Democrats spent countless hundreds of millions of dollars trying to knock off Mitch McConnell, Lindsey Graham. They failed. And so what I think, if Trump loses, what the Republicans are going to need to fall back on as a source of safety and comfort is the fact that they still hold the Senate and they rule in the Supreme Court. So the 2 sort of defensive mechanisms that the Republicans have will, in their minds, I think, prevent the excesses of a Biden administration that would be given over to a large extent to the left. The big question, if Biden wins, is to what degree does he go establishment, and to what degree does he go in the direction of Bernie Sanders and AOC +3. But the last point I'd make, I said earlier about how relentless media opposition, unrelenting, scurrilous charges over 4 years are largely responsible for taking down Donald Trump. But beyond that, think about how dangerous this is, because the media has now learned the lesson, or they think they have, that if they just make their goal in life to take down a political enemy, they can succeed. There's a lot of danger in that for the years ahead.
Already two points, 2 final points that I would like to make. One is that you're right, Tim, that the polling world is toast. I mean, they've just lost all credibility forever. Point number two, President Trump, if we've learned anything about him in these last 4 years, he's not a loser, but he is a fighter. I see this going to the courts, and I think it's possible he might prevail. Just saying. Anyway, folks, that's it for this edition of the Conservative Five. We'll return when the presidential election firms up a bit. So please keep monitoring Liberty Nation for the latest. Thanks, Graham, Sarah, Tim, and Joe. And thanks to you, our viewers. We had so many thousands last night. We're really grateful for you guys. I'm Lisa K. Donner, editor-in-chief of Liberty Nation. Stay tuned to libertynation.com, conservative news where truth and facts matter.